Tonight, breaking news, we can reveal Louise Haigh, a cabinet minister in Keir Starmer's government, has admitted to an offence connected to misleading police in 2014. It happened while the now Transport Secretary was standing to be an MP in 2014. Tonight, she's told us it was a genuine mistake from which she did not make any gain. We'll bring you the story. Also tonight, Keir Starmer accuses the Conservatives of running an experiment in open borders after new figures show under the previous government, net migration peaked at nearly 1 million. It comes as the UK signs a new deal with Iraq to return illegal migrants, with the Home Secretary calling it a new era of partnership. Plus, on the eve of the assisted dying vote in Parliament, we've been checking in with hundreds of MPs to ask how they're planning on voting tomorrow. And I'll speak to the broadcaster Dame Prue Leith, who's tonight making a last-minute appeal to MPs, urging them to vote for the law to be changed. All that and more with Dame Andrea Jenkyns and Christine Jardine, who'll be with us for the next hour. It's Thursday, I'm Sophy Ridge, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. We want to start the show tonight with some breaking news because Sky News can reveal now, for the first time, that Transport Secretary Louise Haigh has admitted pleading guilty to an offence connecting to misleading the police while she was a parliamentary candidate in 2014. Well, our political correspondent Rob Powell has this story. Rob, what have you found out?
So we established that 6 months before the 2015 general election, when Louise Haigh was a parliamentary candidate, she'd already been adopted as a Labour candidate, she appeared at a court in South London and was convicted in relation to an incident that involved misleading the police over an apparently stolen work phone. Now, we put this to Louise Haigh and her team, and they have issued us quite a long statement explaining from their point of view what went on here. And I think it's worth reading out that statement in full to establish what she says went on in her point of view. She says that in 2013, I was mugged while on a night out. I was a young woman and the experience was terrifying. I reported it to the police and gave them a list of what I believed has been taken, including a work mobile phone that had been issued by my employer. Sometime later, I discovered that the mobile in question had not been taken. In the interim, I had been issued with another work phone. The original work device, being switched on, triggered police attention, and I was asked to come in for questioning. My solicitor advised me not to comment during that interview, and I regret following that advice. She goes on to say, the police referred the matter to the CPS, and I appeared before Southwark magistrates. Under the advice of my solicitor, I pleaded guilty, despite the fact this was a genuine mistake from which I did not make any gain. The magistrates accepted all of these arguments and gave me the lowest possible outcome, in brackets, a discharge, available. So she is saying that this was essentially a mistake, a misunderstanding, but that she went to police after this got flagged and didn't say anything, and then went into court when she was facing these convictions while a parliamentary candidate and pled guilty and admitted to them, even though she says at the time this was all a mistake and it didn't happen. Now, how this story has come to light is through a number of sources that have been talking to Sky News. And we have three separate sources who tell a different story. They say that the reason why that false report was made to the police, that it was made for personal gain on Louise Haigh's part. We also have two sources that say that at the time where she was working at Aviva, that she lost her job there as a result and following an internal investigation at Aviva. So it's a complicated picture, a complicated set of circumstances that happened 10 years ago. We also understand that she informed the Shadow Cabinet. When she was appointed to the Shadow Cabinet, she informed the party of this as well. We haven't had any response from Downing Street as yet, and we haven't had any response from Labour. But clearly, I think when you put together the sources that we have compared to the on-the-record statement that we now have from Louise Haigh, I think there are still significant unanswered questions about all this.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Rob Powell there on this news about Louise Haigh pleading guilty to an offence related to misleading police. Thank you. Well, we'll get more reaction to that story from Rob Powell later on in the programme as well. But in the meantime, the political row over immigration is back after new stats today showed immigration hit record levels last year. OK, you're right, the row probably never really went away, did it, if we're honest? But we're now seeing the battle lines of how Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch are going to slug it out over the next 4 years, trying to pin the blame for the bad news on each other and claim credit for the successes. Immigration, we now know, hit record levels in 2023, although numbers have come down more recently. So what's the correct spin? The Tories are to blame for the highs and Labour can take credit for the lows? Or was it Conservative policy that's the reason for the drop and policies that Labour is now ripping up? And if the question you're asking is, who cares about the blame game? Why can't we just talk about the issues in a grown-up way? Well, you're not the only one wondering now, I'm sure. Well, the battle over immigration has been front and centre today. With our report tonight, here is our political editor, Beth Rigby.
He may be smiling, but the news is terrible. Net migration figures shockingly high. A PM perhaps relieved it's not on his watch.
Nearly 1 million people came to Britain in the year ending June 2023. That is 4 times the migration levels compared with 2019. Time and again, the Conservative Party promised they would get the numbers down. Time and again, they failed.
This a Brexit betrayal, this PM promising to turn the page.
Failure on this scale isn't just bad luck. Policies were reformed deliberately to liberalise immigration. Brexit was used for that purpose, to turn Britain into a one-nation experiment in open borders.
Announcing a new security agreement with Iraq to deter migrants and a cast-iron pledge to drive immigration down. People feel incredibly let down by their politicians. You say you want to bring it down. What does that mean?
Beth, when you say people have been let down, you're absolutely right, because they were promised by the last government that it would get control of our borders, and we had a government that completely lost control of our borders. And these numbers, this 4-time increase, that wasn't just bad luck post-Brexit, that was their policy.
The PM, not the only one at a podium today. Reform's Nigel Farage out too, berating the Tories' record in government while telling the public that Labour are even worse. Keir Starmer says he has a plan to drive down migration and has made that commitment. Are you saying that because actually you need Labour to fail on migration in order to try and improve your chances at the next general election?
The incoming Labour government said there would be fewer cross-channel migrants going into hotels. We learned this morning that number has increased by 6,000 just since Labour came to power. And on the broader question of who can come into the country and settle, they seem to be wholly unconcerned on that issue.
But there is concern, huge concern. In 2023, the UK population grew by almost 1 million people through migration. That's more than 3 times the population of Derby in the East Midlands. And in this refugee centre, volunteers are seeing it.
We have seen great increases, but for the last 6 months it's been steady, but at a much higher level than it was 2 or 3 years ago.
Local people are noticing the change too.
Derby has changed so much. Everybody seems to be just ignoring the fact that they're here. Our economy won't last forever. They can't rely on us forever.
The people here voted for Brexit, but instead of taking back control, migration has hit record highs. It isn't Labour's legacy, but it is now their problem to fix. Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Well, our data and economics editor, Ed Conway, has been looking in closer detail at what today's numbers tell us.
Is migration going up or down? It may seem like a simple question, but actually it's a slightly complex answer. But you'll get a sense of it by looking at what the ONS said was happening to migration, net migration, so number of people coming in minus number of people going out. This time last year, they said it had gone up a lot, but look, they said it was coming down. Then new figures came in. So 6 months ago, for the same period, they said, oh, it's a slightly different picture. It is coming down, but it went up a bit higher in the first place. This time around, well, imagine the same things happened, but amp it up a lot more because it went up to an even higher peak and now they say it's coming down. But here's the key thing to look at. If you look at a certain period here, so look at the year to June 2023, a year ago we were told in that period, not only was migration coming down, that it was 672,000 people, net migration into this country. Now we learn in that same period, actually, it was 906,000, so nearly a million, a massive change. And what explains that? Well, if we take that figure, so last time around, as I say, migration is immigration minus emigration. So number of people coming in minus those leaving. Last time, number of people coming in, just over 1 million. Number of people going, just over 500,000. Well, the ONS has looked at it again, looked at the new numbers. They think there's more people who have come in over that period, so 140,000 more people coming in. And the number of people leaving the country, that was slightly fewer than they previously thought, and then tot that up, and then you end up with that figure, nearly 1 million. It's worth asking the question, though, if we look back through history, what is it that's triggered this? Okay, and if you look back, this is just immigration, so just people coming in. It was pretty constant, wasn't it, before COVID, and clearly when the Brexit rules came in, the post-Brexit changes to immigration, look at that change. A massive shift. We've never seen anything like that. Number of people coming in from the EU, that goes down a lot, as you might expect. But look at the rise in the number of people from outside the EU. And this is the key thing. Countries outside the EU, people from there coming into the UK at rates that we really have never seen before. When I say that, look, that's the number of people coming from India just in the last 4 years, from Nigeria, Chinese citizens, Pakistanis. And if you look and compare that with the kind of immigration that we saw from Poland, so, you know, culturally a big moment for the UK, Poland from 2001 to 2011, that was just under 600,000. Well, this is higher than that. And it's worth saying, yeah, these numbers are immigration so far, so we don't know how many people are actually going to stay, whereas the Polish numbers are net migration. But even so, it gives you a sense of this is a big cultural moment for the UK, aside from the economics. Final thing to say, a lot of people say, well, isn't this all about small boats? Well, no. The number of people coming in on small boats is really small in comparison to all the legal routes for migration, in particular, study and work.
Well, we're joined now by the Shadow Home Office Minister, Matt Vickers, for this Conservative Party. Great to have you here. Lots to talk about with these immigration statistics. Just before we get on to all of that, if I could just get your reaction to the top story we broke at the beginning of the programme. I understand you probably only just found out about it before sitting in this chair. But Louise Haigh pleading guilty to an offence relating to misleading police over a stolen phone.
I think, like the people at home, anybody who's just watched that and heard about a minister who apparently, you know, was involved in misleading the police would be deeply concerned. I think there'll be a lot more questions to be answered on that. There'll be questions about who knew what and when. And yeah, deeply concerning. We'll wait and see what else comes from it.
Yeah, as you say, I'm sure not much you can say without knowing more details. But thank you for responding to that story. Right, let's talking about immigration.
Yeah.
Shall we? Today we learn net migration hit a record high in June 2023 of 906,000. So under the Conservatives' watch. Robert Jenrick said it's a day of shame for the Conservative Party. Do you feel ashamed?
I think, do you know what we heard from Kemi yesterday, who talked about the fact that consecutive governments now have let the side down. We failed to get a grasp of those numbers. And it's terrible. But actually, the one bit of light that comes from it is when you look at those figures today. So the figure we're talking about is what was happening last year. The figure over the last year is down 20%. The figure shows us that today. And that's positive, but it tells us we've got to do a hell of a lot more. But actually that 20% is as a result of us preventing people bringing dependents with them to the country. Sensible thing to do. It works. I think, though, for all of the other things that we might be doing in this space, so we know we were trying to do something on salaries, that you couldn't bring a dependent unless you were earning a certain amount of money. That was supposed to kick in April coming. The government seemed to have frozen that for now. We wait to see what happens with that, but we've got to keep going on that front. But illegal immigration is the thing that really ticks people off in my part of the world. There's concern about small boats. And actually, the problem with that is that we need that deterrent. The National Crime Agency say that unless you've got a deterrent, you will never get a grip of this problem. We had a deterrent in place.
Rwanda, then?
So Rwanda
is that? I'm kind of confused. Would you bring it back?
So, well, we've said that we would. We obviously wouldn't have stopped it and we would let those...
But would you bring it back? Is that your policy?
We would have let the flights take off on the 24th of July and it will be kicking in now because actually in the last few months... This is ancient
history now in political
terms. In the last few months...
Would the Conservative Party bring back Rwanda?
I'm coming to it. So in the last few months we've seen immigration into this country go up by 23%. We were closing hotels. We're now opening hotels. And I've been out and I've seen the consequences for communities where those hotels are opening, the local businesses and local residents. But actually when it comes to Rwanda, it was more about the principle, wasn't it? So you can say we're sending them wherever we're sending them. It'd be quite hard probably to send them to Rwanda in a few years' time because we didn't do the government did do a very good job of telling Rwanda we were pulling out. I think they found out via the news. But in real terms,
I'm still really confused.
I believe in the principle.
Would the Conservative Party bring back Rwanda?
We would bring back a deterrent scheme. So it might not be in 5 years' time. Rwanda might not want to talk about this, but the idea, the principle that we put in law, that if you come to this country illegally, you will be detained and returned to your country or sent to a safe third country like Rwanda, then we are well on board with that. That is the way that you solve this. That's what the National Crime Agency says. Without a deterrent, without a reason not to get in that boat, people are going to keep getting in those boats, taking those perilous, dangerous journeys and paying those people smugglers.
I mean, you can see how you're kind of, tying yourself slightly in knots here, because I still don't know.
We'd back Rwanda. We would have been.
So would you bring it back?
We would, if in 5 years' time Rwanda are up for that, then we'd be looking at that. We'd be looking at, like. 50...
I know Kemi Badenoch's not big on policies, but I'm really not clear.
We are
your policy.
If we were in office now, we would be sending people to Rwanda. Yes. In 5 years' time, we might need to do an agreement with another country. Might need to look at what the environment's like. But the National Crime Agency say without a deterrent, you will never solve it. And actually, there's nothing compassionate about allowing people to pay people smugglers to travel across on this dangerous journey. It's sensible for this country, for people in this country, but it's also sensible for the people who depart the safe country that is France to get here.
Andrea Jenkyns in this room today, defecting to Reform. Were you sad to see a former colleague?
So Andrea's a very good friend of mine, actually. I was out on the doorsteps with her in 2015, so I really get on.
Painfully enough.
Yeah, exactly. So I got on very well with Andrea. I love Andrea. I think, do you know what, it's sad, but actually Reform, at their party conference, we thought there was going to be, the news and the gossip and the rumours was that there was going to be huge numbers of people defecting. I think people, make those choices. I'm very sad to see Andrea go, but you know what? I'm going to get on with the job, and I'm sure she's going to get on with the job, and we'll still be mates.
Very nice. So can I ask again about? Can I just ask about an important vote that we're going to see tomorrow on assisted dying? Because MPs, of course, on all different sides are going to be kind of wrestling with their consciences tonight, talking to family members, talking to constituents, listening to the arguments in the House as well. Where's your head at on this?
So I'm undecided. I'm going to go in there tomorrow and listen. I've already rang my dad. I've had that conversation with dad. I've spoke to huge numbers of residents. He had a view. I don't know if he wants me to share it. He had a view. Lots of my residents have had a view. I actually put a survey online on my Facebook page and let residents feed in their perspective. The problem with it, it's a hugely contentious issue. It's one that people have very strong feelings about on either end of the spectrum. But actually, everybody kind of agrees around the principle that nobody wants to see anybody suffer longer than necessary. But at the same time, it's about whether what we put forward is safe and ensures that vulnerable people cannot be harmed as a result of coercion or whatever else comes. So it's actually about the legislation, it's about what's coming forward and whether you think those checks are in place to keep people safe at the same time as hearing the harrowing stories of people who suffer the worst possible death.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? Everyone wants to have the best possible deaths. It's just about the journey to try and get to that place. So that's like you've got a big decision tomorrow.
Plenty to go, yeah. Long night of reading.
Yeah, thanks very much for coming on the programme.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. One of the big political stories of the day are sure to feature in tomorrow's newspapers. We'll have our extended press preview from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the Liverpool Echo's political editor Liam Thorpe and the writer and broadcaster Esther Kraku. Right, let's bring in our duo for the evening, shall we? The former Conservative MP, now, of course, standing for Reform, Dame Andrea Jenkyns, and the Lib Dem MP, Christine Joddy. Not necessarily standing for Reform, I should say, but a member of Reform.
Well, I am standing as a mayoral candidate.
There you go.
Yes.
Talk to me about that decision.
Yes.
How did it come about?
Look, I mean, even before the general election, Reform approached me, and don't forget, I worked with Nigel, I worked with Richard, even 6 years ago during Brexit, so we'd built up these friendships anyway, and other Conservative MPs are friends with them as well. And so what happened really, obviously I lost my seat. Reform did split my vote, and turnout was low in my seat. And
you rejected the approach before the election then?
Well, no, what I believed, Sophie, is if you get elected as an MP for a party, you go down fighting with that party. And I thought that was the honourable thing to do. And I don't regret that decision. I probably would have hung on to my seat if I'd have stayed, if I'd have defected then, but I think it was the right decision. Now, why have I defected now? It was a hard decision. I mean, this is why I had my notes today, and I was actually shaking behind the stage, Sophie, because after nearly 20 years with a party as a party member, I mean, I voted for them before that. It's a big move, especially when you've got friends. And Christine and I were speaking backstage, weren't we, Christine? It becomes a family, doesn't it? But the turning point for me really was a couple of things. I mean, I think it's been coming right from the Rwanda bill. I mean, look, Robert and Suella, Bill Cash and I was the Rwandan rebels. He saw how it needed strengthening to actually be effective. And I think it sort of started then, really. And because to me, it was a big thing in my postbag, and I knew that we had to control illegal migration. But for me, it was Kemi becoming leader. I just don't think she is the right leader of the Conservative Party. I saw how she did not rip up the last EU laws on the statute, which she was tasked to do. I wanted Pretty first. I wanted Robert Jenrick when Pretty came out of the contest.
So if it was a different leader from Kemi Badenoch, you would have stayed in the party?
Yes, absolutely. And then I just thought enough's enough. And one thing I did really, well, a lot of things, when Nigel and Reform stuck up for that police lady in Manchester, and I thought that was a really honourable thing to do, giving her that voice, and so that was another thing that made me decide.
Immigration, obviously, a big issue in that. We've seen these record numbers under the Conservatives today. Who do you think is right in this argument? Because, Labour is saying, look, this is all the Conservatives' fault. The Conservatives are saying, look, we've got some things wrong, but actually it started dropping, and it's Labour who ditched those policies.
I don't think either of them are right, to be absolutely honest. I think what we need to do is break the gangs. To that extent, I agree with some of what Keir Starmer is doing. We have to break the gangs. We have to stop people going through the dangerous journey that Matt talked about. But I don't think, we knew the figures were going to fall because they fall at this time of year, because we're going into the winter. So there are fewer people getting in small boats to go across the channel. So I don't really think that we can read too much in it. And to claim success for having failed, because nobody has succeeded yet in resolving the problem, in fixing the immigration system, which is undoubtedly broken, needs attention. I don't think the Conservatives did. I don't think the plan for Rwanda, however it had been beefed up, would have worked. I objected to it in principle, and I think the Labour Party have a lot to do to convince us that they're on top of the issue.
What do you think? Do you think your old party deserves a bit of credit for the numbers coming down, or do you think Christine's right?
No, I
dropped anyway.
I do think that there's always a time lapse from the measures you put in place. I do think they deserve some credit for that. But like Robert Jenrick said today, he feels really ashamed of those figures, and quite rightly so.
You feel ashamed as well, do you?
Oh, completely. I had a petition, Sophie, well over a year ago, with Claire from Conservative Post, who does the blog, online blog, and we got over 50,000 people signing it, saying they wanted to leave the ECHR, just as Robert was campaigning on. And I think that, I know you disagree with that, Christine, but, in sort of my neck of the woods, people believe that.
For the ECHR, Kemi, and I know you're not a fan of Kemi's, but I watched the leadership debate, and Kemi admitted that if you talk about leaving the ECHR, you're not actually resolving the issue. You're not. You are, in a way, and what Robert said about remain or leave, you're re-arguing the Brexit debate on a different body. That didn't work the first time. It's not going to work to do it again. And the ECHR is not the problem.
Well, what would the Lib Dems do? I don't think the Lib Dems want to control illegal migration or even legal migration.
That's nonsense. What we have said is that we need to fix the immigration system because it's fundamentally broken. The Conservatives failed to do anything about it. The Labour Party, they've come in with plans to crack down on the gangs, which we think is important. But we want to see safe legal routes and deal with the problem at its root. Do what other countries have done and say, if you want to come to this country, apply in the country where you are. And for investment, international development was key. When we were doing 0.7% of GDPR, which isn't that much money, It was much lower than it is now because people had hope in the countries where they were.
Coordinated outfits, maybe less coordinated.
I thought she was going to defect as well. Are you going to come to reform, Christine?
Oh, that would be quite a neat story.
It would set the cat among the pigeons, wouldn't it?
Thanks both very much indeed. I did just want to bring you an update on the story that we started the programme with today, because Sky News can reveal that the Transport Secretary Louise Haigh admitted pleading guilty to an offence connected to misleading the police while a parliamentary candidate in 2014. She's told us it was a genuine mistake from which she did not make any gain. Our political correspondent, Rob Powell, breaking the story this evening. Rob, what can you bring us?
Yeah, we have had some reaction coming in from the top of the Conservative Party, the opposition, of course, from Nigel Huddleston, reacting to that, saying they're extremely concerning revelations about the person responsible for managing £30 billion of taxpayers' money. Keir Starmer has serious questions to answer regarding what he knew and about when the person he appointed as having Transport Secretary admitted to having misled the police. So we do know that that when Louise Haigh was appointed to the shadow cabinet, that this information was put out there. It was given to senior members of Labour. There's still a little bit of lack of clarity over that because there's, of course, the question of sort of which shadow cabinet, because she held a variety of jobs on the shadow front bench. But I think you can read into that, given she's a cabinet minister now, that Keir Starmer was aware of that before today and before we broke those revelations anyway. And I think that is why you are seeing Conservative figures now trying to pin this essentially on a matter of judgment, yes, for Louise Haigh, who of course says that she believes this was a genuine mistake, that this was something that came out of a mugging, that she essentially was badly advised, as she sees it now, by solicitors to not say anything to the police and to plead guilty 6 months before the 2015 general election. Clearly it's a question, and people will be raising questions of judgment of what she did, but Conservative figures raising this in relation to Keir Starmer's judgment now as well. OK,
Rob, thank you very much indeed. Rob Powell there with that update on our lead story this evening. You're watching The Politics Hub coming up. Well, tomorrow MPs will vote on the assisted dying bill. We'll take a look at how the numbers shaping up on each side of the aisle are going. And I'll also be speaking to the Bake Off judge, Dame Prue Leith, about why she's campaigning for the law to change.
First Minister, how are you?
Good morning. Good morning.
Nice to see you. How are you feeling?
Looking forward to getting into the parliamentary chamber.
Are you any further forward to making a decision?
No, it's an important day today.
All of the claims were in line with my parliamentary duties, so I'm making that clear to you, Conor.
He was a Scot through and through.
He was a very good politician.
Alex Salmond was controversial, he was a disruptor, but above all, he was respected.
Will you resign if you lose this week?
Again, I'm not planning to, of course, lose the vote of no confidence. I'm planning to win that vote of no confidence.
His face said it all.
My intention to stand down as party leader.
This is now a storm with deadly consequences. How are they feeling?
They're a bit scared at the minute.
We've been told to evacuate.
How are you feeling?
Devastated.
Hundreds of homes were wiped out by flooding. I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent.
It was probably the darkest time in my life.
Scott is 5 years sober after a cocaine addiction left him close to death.
Scotland has a shameful record, worse than England, the worst in Europe. Why not just say you've failed? Because then you might get more respect from families who've lost loved ones.
This is where one of the UK's most prolific rapists thought he'd got away with murder.
Sky News can reveal that former sex workers had told police he was sexually violent.
My Emma.
Free wherever you get your news. It's over, isn't it? The Americans say he is Rossi, a fraudster.
This has been one of the most bizarre cases ever heard in a courtroom in this country.
A dangerous murderer.
Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive Andrew Ennis after this?
She said she can forgive him, but as long as he's behind bars.
By doing the right thing, it's destroyed your life.
They terrorised me. They intimidated me.
Sky News, the full story first.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Hello, welcome back. Well, tomorrow will be one of those historic days in the House of Commons where the way that MPs vote could radically change the country, because the assisted dying bill has aroused passionate debate on all sides, but the outcome of the vote itself is still filled with uncertainty. So hopefully we might get a bit more light shed on it right now with our political correspondent Liz Bates, who's been looking at some of the numbers.
Yes, I will try and shed a bit of light on it. So, huge moment, as you said, but it is still hugely unpredictable. And there's a few reasons why. First of all, if we look at the 2015 vote, so MPs did vote on this issue in 2015. You can see a majority against, 331 against, 119 for, 199 absent, 1 abstainer. The interesting thing actually about this is, Sophie, less than 10 years ago this vote happened, but the number of MPs that are still in Parliament, less than a third. So you can see Parliament has changed hugely in that period of time. Over 2/3 of the MPs that are going to be voting on this issue have never voted on it before, so we can't look at their voting records. So instead, what we have been doing in terms of number crunching is looking at their social media, and we've been reaching out to them personally. So some have declared publicly, some have told us privately how they're going to vote. And so we do now have a sense of how the vote might go tomorrow, because we do have some initial numbers on that. Oh, this is you can see here Parliament shrinking to a third. That's what I was talking about before.
Exactly.
Yeah, so these are the only MPs that are left. But if we move on to what we think might happen tomorrow, so look, these are the MPs who have either publicly declared or told us they are going to vote for this legislation, 181 against 148. So you can see a slim majority. Some of those MPs are just voting to get it past second reading. So the majority could be very slim. Now, if you look at the next bit, the next group, undecided and MPs that have not said publicly, huge. Wow. 321. Some of these MPs, and you heard Matt Vickers earlier on the programme.
It sounded like he's calling his dad.
He
says there's going to be a lot of reading tonight. People are agonising about this.
Genuinely undecided. And the votes tomorrow, loads of MPs like that. Some of them are going to sit through the whole debate and decide at the end of it. This is why it's so difficult to predict. About 120 of those MPs genuinely undecided, the rest we don't know. If we look at the party breakdown, that is quite interesting. These MPs at the end, abstainers for various reasons. The SNP say it won't affect Scotland, that's why they won't vote. Other MPs in there, Sinn Féin. But look, you can see this massive group of MPs, Labour, lots of new Labour MPs, that's the cohort. Brand new elected Labour MPs, they have to make, they've only been in Parliament a few months, they've got to make this massive life and death decision. They're going to swing the vote. Now,
what a thing, like just entering Parliament a couple of months and then you're deciding on something like that.
Yeah, this is one of the things that is going to be influencing them. Public opinion, 73%, this is the latest YouGov polling, in favour of changing the law. That will be in their heads, no question. The other thing, of course, cabinet interventions. So we can see how the cabinet are going to vote. Some of them are declared. Ed Miliband has said that it's cruel what currently happens. Lisa Nandy has said it's unsustainable. We've got the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, in there, and some other big names. The other group, cabinet ministers that are against, a bit more controversial, because in this group we have the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary. They will have to, in detail, implement this legislation if it passes, and yet they are strongly against, vehemently against, and they've spoken about it.
It's a huge
Could
thing.
That persuade some of the MPs as well?
And it's like you say, if they do have to implement something as well, it could even be, will they be able to do that? Will it be a resignation matter? So many questions.
The final group, I mean, this is what's so interesting about a free vote. The Prime Minister, we still don't know how he's going to vote. We think he's going to vote in favour, but he hasn't said. We've got other big beasts, the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, we still don't know.
Steve Reed said he was making up his mind to me, didn't know. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And so, we're still very much in limbo on the eve of the vote. It looks like, if you look at our numbers, the likelihood is that it will pass second reading, but we just don't know. It is potentially the most unpredictable vote of this Parliament.
Extraordinary. Liz, thank you so much for talking us through all that so clearly. There'll be lots of coverage of this, of course. I'll be presenting here on Sky News tomorrow with all of the implications of that important vote. It's also, of course, an issue that's been debated not only in Parliament but across the country, and which has been taken up on different sides by faces familiar to millions. Now, one of them is the Bake Off presenter, Dame Prue Leith, who has championed a change in the law. I spoke to her earlier. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's great to have you here. You feel very familiar to me, so it almost feels as if we've met before.
I'm not tasting cake.
No, exactly. Something much more serious and much more important, assisted dying. And of course, MPs will be wrestling with what to do ahead of tomorrow's vote. What would you urge them?
I would urge them to vote for a change, because there's no question the current law is not working. Do you know there's something like 7,000 people a year who die with unrelieved pain that cannot be relieved, that palliative care does not get to, in hospital every year. And, you know, it's unnecessary. We don't have to do that.
It's something that you've thought about a lot, you've spoken about, you've kind of campaigned about. But it's something that you said you didn't think about until the death of your brother.
Yeah. I don't think anybody thinks about it until they see somebody dying a horrible death. And if you look at the supporters for the idea of the change in law, they almost all are families of people who have had a dreadful death, and there are millions of them. And I think most of the people who oppose the idea, it's a sort of intellectual rather than an emotional reaction. And so they're very worried about whether the safeguards would be good enough. And then there's a religious lobby which thinks it's actually wrong, that it's only God's business to take your life, not yours. But I think they should not be worried about the safeguards, because I think this is the tightest law that's ever been proposed, and it's got far more safeguards than the current situation is. There's nothing safe about dying at the moment. There's no protections, there's no oversight. Nobody's concerned about it. You're just left to die, and you have to suffer the pain. I mean, people have three choices. If they are dying of a very painful disease and it's intolerable, they either have to just put up with it, or they can go to Switzerland if they've got the money, which is a lonely, miserable business to do, or they can commit suicide. And think what that does to your family if you commit suicide. I mean, that's their choice. Now, why can't we have the choice of a peaceful death?
Can you talk to me, if you can, about David?
About my brother?
About your brother?
Yes, of course.
Because that obviously had such a impact on you.
It did. I mean, he was in an NHS hospital. It was a long time ago, and I hope things are better than they were then. But he had bone cancer, and the trouble with bone cancer is you don't die of it. You have to wait for the cancer to move to an organ, which will then kill you. And so he was in screaming agony. The morphine would work for a couple of hours, but then it would fail, and he wouldn't get another dose. They only did it every 4 hours. And so he was really first crying, whimpering, moaning, then crying, then screaming, and then absolutely desperate. And the rest of the ward had to suffer it. The nurses had to suffer it. His family had to suffer it.
I bet you could still hear it. It must be.
Yeah. It was just awful. And then he decided that he was begging to be for somebody to help him. And he would say things like, if I was a dog, if I was a horse, you would do the right thing by me. You'd put me down. And, you know, this just went on. And then in the end, he decided to refuse all antibiotics because he knew that he'd get pneumonia, which is what happens when you're very weak. You get pneumonia very easily.
Because he wanted to die. He wanted to take the pain away.
So he decided he'd die of pneumonia. Well, to die of pneumonia means you drown in your own phlegm. You just can't breathe anymore because your passages are all full of mucus. And that's a horrible thing to watch and a dreadful thing for him to suffer.
How old was he?
He was in his 60s. But his, I mean, his wife, afterwards, she could never, ever think about, her memories of those times was all about this agony and the fact that she wanted him to die. She said, I would be sitting there thinking, please, please die. And that's an awful thing for somebody to have to go through. And
not to be able to help as well, if someone is begging for that help in pain.
You can't do anything.
This is a debate that obviously it divides people, right? People bring their own experiences, their own attitudes. I think you probably know where I'm going with it, but it is, I guess, an unusual situation to speak to you, because earlier this week I spoke to your son, Danny, who was in this studio as well, who obviously has come to a very different conclusion to you. You know, he worries about vulnerable people or people who feel pressured by their families or even by a cash-strapped NHS to take their own lives.
I think that's a legitimate thing to be concerned about, but I think he should not be concerned about that, because, you know, the Health Select Committee studied this in February. They took 6 weeks, I think, over it. And they went to all the countries that are where it is legal, and they studied all this. And they came back and they wrote a report. And this is a cross-party select committee. They wrote a report and they said they had not observed any evidence of any coercion, nor had they found that palliative care suffered financially or in the way it is delivered. And they also found, what's the other? Oh, the slippery slope argument. They also found no evidence of a slippery slope. Well, why do we have a select committee studying it if we're not going to listen to the results?
Do you have rows with Danny about this, or do you kind of disagree respectfully? What's it like on your dinner table?
We mostly don't get into it, because it always just gets into a long discussion, which is never bad-tempered, I must say, you know, because we are very fond of each other.
Yeah.
So,
it's a classic family, though, isn't it, right? I think every family would recognise that. Certain issues it's best not to bring up over the Christmas dinner table,
yes,
right?
exactly, because, you know, it's not going to get anywhere. But I believe that if Daniel had seen his uncle die or his father die, he probably would have a different attitude.
You speak there about his father,
but,
your first husband. What happened with that?
Happened with what?
You speak there about if he'd seen his father die.
His father.
Your first husband.
My husband, his father, died. Old age, really. He was 80 and he had emphysema, but he gradually couldn't breathe, and he was in and out of hospital a lot, and his heart would stop, and then you know what happens. Everybody jumps on you to rescue. And I remember once being rushed down a corridor like in the movies, you know, and he was trying to hang on to my hand, and he was trying to put my fingers in his mouth for some reason, I think for comfort, you know. He was just trying to... And, of course, the doctors were just pushing me away because they were trying to save his life. And this happened 2 or 3 times. And finally, they did say to me, do you want us to keep doing this? And I said, no, I didn't want you to do it the first time.
And again, it's that, you know, the action of putting your hand in his mouth, it says a lot, doesn't it, about what he was going through at that time.
What he wanted was comfort and me.
And pain
and
relief.
what he was being given was massive medical intervention, which he didn't want, I didn't want, and it didn't do him any good in the end.
It's been a real privilege to talk to you about all this thing, and I'm sure that many of our viewers, what you say will resonate very deeply with them, particularly those who lost loved ones. It does feel that we can't get people's deaths right at all.
It's such a difficult subject, and the public and MPs and everybody would rather not talk about it. And I think that is my greatest fear. I think that MPs will not be really considering this matter. They're not looking at both sides of the argument. They're not looking at the evidence. If they look at the evidence, they will definitely end up on my side of the argument, because it is so much easier to just abstain or vote for the status quo, which you think you're doing nothing. But of course, if you're voting for the status quo, you're voting for continuing a law which is cruel and not working. It's just appalling. And you know what? I think we're so behind in this. You know, Scotland's further ahead of us, the Isle of Man, Jersey, never mind, you know, Canada and Australia are already there, New Zealand's already there, the Netherlands, most of America. You know, what's the matter with us? Little old England doesn't want to do it.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, from an opposing perspective on this issue, Kamali Melbourne will be interviewing the silent witness actress Liz Carr on the UK Tonight at 8 p.m. We'll also have full coverage of the assisted dying bill debate tomorrow from 9 a.m. here on Sky News. I'm going to be here to take you through the result and the vote itself. Right, let's talk to Andrea and Christine, shall we? Look, I'm so struck with this debate that everyone is going to have such a personal take on it, very, very deeply held in so many ways, or all of those MPs wrestling with what to do. Andrea, you take a different position. So
yes.
That's why I wanted to go to you first. You take a different position
Yes.
to what we just heard from Dame Prue, don't you?
I mean, I actually agree with the one thing I agree with Gordon Brown when he said we need better end-of-life care. And when both my mum and dad got seriously ill, you know, their mental health suffers. And I think we need better support with mental health, end-of-life care. But I also, when my dad was really seriously ill, he caught MRSA in the hospital, and he was high on morphine as well because he had mesothelioma cancer. And the hospital got him to sign, the nurse got him to sign a do not resuscitate. And he was high on morphine, and he wasn't, you know, corpus mentis enough to sign that. And Mum and I went in, and Dad didn't even realise he'd signed it because we know his held beliefs wasn't that. And so I think so many mistakes can happen, and it's far better to actually help people when they are seriously ill rather than something like this, because to me this is Pandora's box, Sophie. There's no putting this back in once, and it'll get, just as we've seen with the abortion laws as well, it'll get more liberalised, and what next?
Christine?
I couldn't agree more that we need better palliative care. But I think the problem is that palliative care doesn't work for everyone. And if you think about, I don't even want to contemplate the possibility of being given the sort of news that you have a terminal diagnosis. And we have to remember that in this case, it's not like Canada or the Netherlands where they have this unbearable suffering definition. You have to have a terminal diagnosis. 2 doctors and a judge have to approve it. But when you're in that position, what goes through your mind must be, and anyone who's been seriously ill and thought they might be in that position knows that what goes through your mind is all the things that you might miss, all the things you're going to be denied, perhaps seeing your children grow up, perhaps seeing your children married, perhaps if you have grandchildren, seeing them grow up. And the one thing that you want is to not have a bad death. It's the one thing left to you. And if that choice is yours, that must be so important that you can have the choice. And one of the things that the research that Prue was talking about there showed us is that in the countries where they have the sort of definition that we're talking about tomorrow, not everyone who chooses to go through the process of getting, whether you want to call it approval or permission to have an assisted death, actually does it. Because one of the most important things is that it gives people the reassurance that if it becomes too much, if the palliative care isn't working anymore and the
but sometimes the doctors get it wrong, Christine.
But
I've got a relative.
If I could just finish, because I think the important thing that we have to bear in mind, all of us voting tomorrow, is that it's about the people who are at the centre of this. And if they have that reassurance that they will have the choice. And I think if we looked at the most important slide for me there was the one that says that 3/4 of the British public want us to do this. And I think we should be listening and we should be thinking, not about ourselves and how difficult it is for us. That's what we're there for, is to make difficult decisions, but about them.
Look, I've got a relative who had diagnosed with stage 4 cancer previously, and you know, it was thinking it's the end of days, but he actually recovered from it. You know, I think the advances in medicine and the doctors do not always get it right. And this, as I said, it's Pandora's box. It's too final, and it just opens to abusing the system.
But there are safeguards in this bill, because everyone is very aware, we are all aware of the dangers, and there's so many safeguards built into this bill. If it goes ahead, the safeguards will be the strongest anywhere in the world. And I think tomorrow, when we consider it, we have to take all these things into account, but put the people who have the choice at the centre of it.
Thanks both very much. I know how difficult it is to speak, but I know also particularly like sharing the story of your dad as well. It's, you know, it's these are really tough things for people to be grappling with. So, you know, we appreciate it. We really do. I did just want to bring you another update on the breaking story that we're covering on the programme tonight, because Sky News has revealed that the Transport Secretary Louise Haigh has admitted pleading guilty to an offence connected to misleading the police while she was a parliamentary candidate in 2014. We can go back now to our political correspondent, Rob Powell. Rob.
So I think there's going to be a process maybe over the coming days where more of the details around this start to come out. There's no argument about the core of this story. Louise Haigh has admitted that she pled guilty and that she was convicted in 2014. Now, since we've been on air, another outlet has reported that that conviction was a fraud by misrepresentation conviction, and intriguingly as well has alleged that it related to multiple mobile phones, is referring to mobile phones in the plural. That's something we are checking with Louise Haigh's team. So I think there is going to be a process where some of the context and the detail starts to come out. This was 10 years ago, after all. It may well quite quickly move on to the politics, though. I think it lands, this story, against an intriguing political backdrop. You'll remember it was a month or so ago that Louise Haigh was publicly rebuked by the Prime Minister Keir Starmer for comments around boycotting P&O ferries over their mass sackings. That led to a temporary shelving of a £1 billion investment planned by P&O's parent company. She also is a cabinet minister that has connections to Sue Gray, the outgoing or ex Downing Street chief of staff, and there has been speculation in the last month or so since Sue Gray left that post how well she will fare in government under the new regime in Downing Street. So I think there is a fact-finding process to go on, but an intriguing political backdrop as well.
Yeah, well, you broke the story at 7. You've already come in here to do 2 updates, which perhaps gives you a little sense that the story does have a bit further to run. Rob, thank you very much indeed. Rob Powell there. Still to come on the Politics Hub. Our panellist, Andrea here, made the news with her defection to Reform today. But how many of the defections from times past does she and Christine remember?
Coming up on the UK Tonight, we'll hear from supporters on both sides of the assisted dying debate ahead of tomorrow's historic vote in the Commons. Plus, how hard will the Greg Wallace allegations hit an already beleaguered BBC? All that and much more on the UK Tonight at 8.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends.
We've got a heck of a race.
This is when the Premier League properly clicks into gear. With the reigning champions against perhaps their most likely challengers.
Liverpool, Manchester City,
The summit meeting of English football's top 2.
Liverpool, Manchester City on USA.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling? I am angry.
It is an anti-woman agenda.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Can you beat Donald Trump, Governor? President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, our God works, so we can't do nothing. The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way.
Free, wherever you get your news.
Excited.
I've had severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Well, the Politics Hub team had a bit of a shock around lunchtime when we saw our prospective panellist, Andrea Jenkyns, on TV being revealed as Reform's latest defector from the Conservatives. Didn't expect that one, but thanks for coming on.
Thank you. I don't think a lot of my friends expected it either.
No. It did start us thinking, though, about some of the most memorable defections in recent political history. So we thought we'd see how many our panel could remember. Right, we've got a couple of questions to bring you. Right, first one. To which party did Winston Churchill defect?
The Liberals.
20 years.
The Liberals.
It was... Here we go. The Liberals. It was the Liberals. Yeah. Correct. Right. Next question. You ready? You've got 1 out of 1 so far. When did the Gang of Four leave Labour to form the SDP?
1981.
Was it 87?
It was 81. It was 81.
Okay.
Christine nudges ahead. Right, here we go. In 2019, 8 Labour and 3 Conservative MPs defected to form Change UK. Which of these was not one of them? Who was not one of them? Anna Soubry, Chika Amina, or Dominic Grieve? Who was
Dominic Grieve.
It was Dominic Grieve.
Oh,
it was
okay.
Dominic Grieve.
I just put them all in the same group.
You were like,
they're the Liberals of the Conservative Party.
And away from the UK, before founding his own party, for President Emmanuel Macron was the economics minister for which French... Oh, no, this is not it. Right, let's go. How many of Reform's 5 MPs used to be Conservatives?
Oh, I don't know that one.
Well, 3.
It was 3.
Yes.
Very good.
Yes.
I think we should work as a team then. You've got 100% right.
Yeah,
pull them together. And very quickly, Emmanuel Macron used to be economics minister for which party? Socialists, Republics, or the Greens?
Oh.
The Greens?
Socialists.
The answer is, it was the Socialists. Very good. There you go.
I thought it was going to be Republicans.
I think you got more than me.
Thanks very, very much indeed. A very wide-ranging show. It's great to have you on. That is it from us tonight. I'll see you tomorrow, though, for full coverage of that all-important debate on assisted dying.